Love and peace, peace and light. Hello, lovely light beings, and welcome to my channel. Today I am doing another video about the American Aborigines. Today I'm talking about Jim Crow and the origins of the term colored in this video. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. Before we get started, I just would like you to take the time to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that you can get updates of when I post my latest videos and also when I go live on YouTube. I'll greatly appreciate that. I have over 800 videos here on YouTube. Don't forget to binge watch them. I talk about the American Aborigines. I talk about mental health. And I also talk about spirituality. Love and peace. Bye-bye. So, let's get started, you guys. Okay. I was talking about the Jim Crow and the origins of the term colored. Those usually go hand in hand, especially with the beginning stages of when Jim Crow first came out, was first passed here in the U.S. And we're going to talk about it in more and go and do a deep dive on this particular topic. And Jim Crow was a time that was a period that took place right after slavery, you know, and for the American Aborigines here in the Americas. And during that time period, the blacks were separated, or was not allowed to interact with the Caucasians. And there was a series of laws that was put in place in order to prevent, American Aborigines from succeeding or prevailing in different aspects in their lives. Yes, I did a video about Tyler, the South African singer, and how she used the term color to describe herself. And I was explaining how the black people here in the Americas were offended by that particular title. My video goes into the origins and history of colored and the Jim Crow laws that took place here in the Americas. And this particular video, I promised everybody that I was going to do a video about Jim Crow and the term colored in a future video, and see this video. So if you haven't saw the Tyler video, you may want to check it out, because I was discussing how, why Black Americans are offended by that term, and there's a reason, because there's a history behind it. And this particular video, I'm going to be going into more details. So now I'm going to ask ChatGPT about the term colored, and how the question is origins and colored and Jim Crow. That's what I typed in. Just a statement, but I'm going to give you the response that ChatGPT has for this particular topic, this subject matter. And here it goes.
The terms colored and Jim Crow are deeply rooted in the history of racial segregation and discrimination in the United States, particularly against African Americans. Colored. The term colored was historically used to describe people of African descent, especially during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It reflected the racial hierarchy prevalent in society at the time. Organizations such as the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, founded in 1909, adopted this term to advocate for civil rights, though it has since fallen out of favor due to its association with segregation and discrimination. Jim Crow. This term originates from a minstrel show character created in the early 19th century. By the late 1800s, Jim Crow came to symbolize the system of laws and practices that enforced racial segregation in the southern United States. The Jim Crow laws, enacted from the 1880s to the 1960s, mandated the separation of races in public spaces, schools, transportation, and more. This era institutionalized racial discrimination and inequality, leading to widespread disenfranchisement and social injustice for African Americans. The Jim Crow era effectively ended with the Civil Rights Movement, culminating in landmark legislation like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which aimed to dismantle the legal framework of segregation and protect voting rights.
All right. There you have it. That's the answer that Jim Crow, what Jim Crow was about here in the United States and how it applies to the term colored. So, yes. Now I'm going to go into more details about Jim Crow and its origins. Now, according to ChatGPT, there were different shows and that was going on in the past under blackface, and that's where it stems from, minstrel shows. And I'm going to share with you all some videos that go more into details about Jim Crow and the origins of Jim Crow and how it got started and how it's going today and how it's continuing to go into the future. You know, it's still going on to this very day, and some people don't even realize it. But the next video that I'm showing you is about how Jim Crow had started, you know, the origins of it, the history of it. And this particular person did a really great job at describing what happened with Jim Crow. You know, she poured a lot of emotions into it because it happened to her people, our people. And it's quite emotional, especially when you hear the story behind it. You know, a lot of people don't know this story, so now you get a chance to hear about it here in this video.
I have never been gaslit this bad. I'm doing research for my paper, and I found out, I didn't know before, that Jim Crow was the name of a character in minstrel shows where they used to do blackface and make fun of slaves. I didn't know that Jim Crow was likely the name of a young slave that the songwriter saw as he was going by on the road, and he said that the man was severely crippled, but still he was dancing, and that became the foundation of Jim Crow. So that musician proceeded to cover his face with tar and perform wearing ripped up rags, and that was the representation of the black community. When white people saw that, they thought that name perfectly embodied the restructuring at the time. They called it the Redemption era, after the antebellum era, where they decided not to pay attention to the 14th and 15th Amendment and just make all these laws that made it impossible to be a person, to have any value. I really didn't understand that all this stuff was so very connected and so in our face. I've been running into a lot of barriers. A lot of the stuff's not written down because they didn't let enslaved people learn how to read or write, and they didn't want them to be able to speak their native languages. They didn't want them to be able to keep this kind of history alive. And I get why, because I'm literally sitting here in a study room by myself, crying in front of my screen because I can't believe they treated people like this and called themselves the civilized ones. So that was just a little PSA. Stay woke, stay blessed.
Well, you guys, that person did a really great job at explaining the origins of Jim Crow and how it started. But this next video, this person talks about how it's still going on. A lot of people try to say that it's not happening this very day. You know, he actually shows how not only Jim Crow is still going on, but slavery is also still going on. And I think a lot of people don't realize that Jim Crow and slavery is still happening currently in the United States. It's just transformed into a different form of it. saw another lady on TikTok that was trying to say that there's a new Jim Crow era, and there's no such thing as that. I'll say Jim Crow never really stopped. It's just a different form of it. It just transformed or morphed into a different form of it, you know. And also with the segregation and the discrimination is still happening. You can see it with the gentrification and the redlining. That's still going on right now. It hasn't changed. So I would say that Jim Crow has transformed itself, but it still exists. It hasn't disappeared. And that's where I disagree with that other YouTuber. But yeah, the one that is talking about the new Jim Crow. I feel like it's still never left, especially for Black Americans. It's always been here for us. It has never changed. It's just a different form of it. Other people might start to see it for the first time because it hasn't affected them. Like the Hispanics that they was, with this immigration craziness with trying to deport people. But we have always experienced it. It hasn't changed. It's been a different form of it. And I think some people are just now starting to wake up to it because there has been an energetic shift here. The veil has been lifted, you guys. The veil has been lifted. But here's this video. This man does a really great job, an excellent job in explaining how Jim Crow and slavery is still here and it's still happening to this very day. It's just a different form.
A lot of people ask me, what was my aha moment? What made me change my perspective? And it's when I saw this. So a Black person in the United States during the Jim Crow era faced second-class citizenship, disenfranchisement, barriers to voting, barriers to education, barriers to employment, and barriers to housing. Then we had the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which stated we could no longer do any of this. We could no longer discriminate based on race. So in 2023, what is the only group of people that we can legally discriminate against? We can legally relegate to second-class citizenship, create barriers to voting, barriers to education, barriers to employment, barriers to housing. If you answered convicted felon, you are absolutely correct. In 2023, a convicted felon is the only group of people that we can legally do all this to. Now, do you believe it's a coincidence that 1 in 3 Black males carry this label as convicted felon as opposed to 1 in 17 white males? If you answered yes to that question, let's take a look at what's happened since the dismantling of the Jim Crow laws. We've had a 700% increase in our prison population. We've gone from 300,000 inmates to as high as 2.3 million. Now, I do believe we're back down to about 1.8 million today. We had the law and order agenda, which was an increase in police spending and a decrease in school funding, which created the school to prison pipeline. We also had the war on drugs, which we now know was a war on people. We had the 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act, and we had the 1994 Crime Bill. Now, the 86 Anti-Drug Abuse Act differentiated between rock cocaine and powder cocaine, which we know predominantly impacted the Black community. And the 94 Crime Bill created harsher sentences, lengthier sentences, and minimum mandatories. We also know that Black people make up 53% of all exonerations, 69% of exonerations for drug crimes, and they're 7 times more likely to be wrongly convicted. So when I seen all of this, I realized that racism in this country never ended. We have a systemic issue.
Well, you got the gist of that video. I think he did a great job at explaining how, Jim Crow has still, it's still happening right now. And also even slavery, he even pointed out how slavery is still happening through the prison system, the school to prison system that's going on. He explained that as well, very detailed and thorough. Now, the next video that I'm going to be showing you is about how a lot of, people, the palm color people in particular, believe that Jim Crow that racism don't exist. They say that currently there's no such things, and slavery was such a long time ago, and that Jim Crow was such a long time ago. But that is not necessarily true, because it's still happening to us to this very day. It's just transformed, and we see it. And just because they're not experiencing it themselves doesn't mean it doesn't exist, because there's a lot of things that's happening throughout this world that people don't know about because they haven't experienced it. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It does. It's a reality for the indigenous aborigines here in this country. And so, yeah. And so I love how this content creator did a great job at explaining how Jim Crow and slavery never left, and that black people have already experienced it and still experience it, and that it's not, Jim Crow, the old form of it, didn't disappear until recently. This guy goes into detail his personal experience, especially in the South. I'm in the South too. I'm in Atlanta and in Georgia, so a lot of these things still happening. These sundown towns still exist. Lynchings are still existing, in some places, even though it gets swept under the rug. As now they try to use suicide as an example, for lynchings. Now it gets covered up a lot, or it doesn't get, I would say, announced over the media like it should. It's always covered up with a suicide, almost, but personally I believe that it should be investigated further, especially if it's been related to cops, or I wouldn't even say cop, if it's very questionable, especially when a person is hanging, just because of the history of this country and how it's so, especially in sundown towns and those areas, it should be investigated always, for a hate crime immediately, because a simple history and the statistics of the past. A lot of these things are still happening, and just it should be investigated further. But I'm going off on a tangent. I don't want to go into that. I may do another video explaining. I did do a previous video, I think, in the past, touching on that subject. You may want to check it out. Like I said, I have over 800 videos. You can check that video out. But yeah, this next video is really interesting, and I think that you all would definitely like it, and it shed more light onto how all these things that happened to Black Americans with Jim Crow, and and slavery is still sort of is still happening right now, especially in the South, and it's like a recent phenomenon. It's a recent catastrophe, and it's still happening right now. And it looks like they're trying to make it be a future thing, but it's something that we have to work on to make sure it doesn't continue, Yes. So here's the video.
I don't want to hear about fucking slavery from people who never fucking had to deal with it. I don't want to hear about how I'm fucking racist for the last 40 years of my life because of something that happened 300, 400, 200 fucking years ago. Can we all look at each other and be like, all right?
The reason why this conversation is a never-ending one is because people who take that stance are always willfully obtuse on the subject of oppression when it comes to us. It's so easy to run to the argument that slavery happened 200 years ago, 300 years ago, because then you could just close your mind off to everything that happened after slavery, like i.e. Jim Crow. Jim Crow was this lifetime. Ruby Bridges has an Instagram account. Many of our parents are alive, are only in their 50s and 60s, especially those of us who have families born down south. My father was born in 1965 in Mississippi, a few months before the Voting Rights Act was passed. Guess how old he is? He's barely 60 years old. Jim Crow was just as bad as slavery. But every time we have this conversation, you gloss over Jim Crow and just jump to, oh, well, that happened 300 years ago. Get over it. We have parents still alive from the era where, I'll give you something real quick. When I say my father was born in Mississippi, and I talked to him and my grandmother who are still alive about that time period, just something small. A lot of people, a lot of our parents who were born in Jim Crow couldn't be born in hospitals in the South. Because of lack of resources like driving. There weren't many hospitals in rural areas, or they didn't have adequate staff for the maternity wards. So it was just easier for Black people giving birth to give birth at home with midwives. I am the first generation, and I'm 30 something, I'm 38. I am the first generation of males, or just in general from my father's line, paternally, to be born in a hospital. I'll say that slowly. I am the first generation as a 38-year-old to be born in a hospital, because back in Mississippi when my dad was born, it didn't make sense for people to try to drive to Memphis to find a hospital if they were going in labor, knowing they wouldn't get adequate treatment. So they would be born in a shotgun house to a midwife. That's how recent this stuff is, and the people from that time period are still alive. Even after Jim Crow, because people say, oh, well, now you're bringing up Jim Crow. Even after Jim Crow, things were still happening. Redlining, lynchings, not just down south, but up north. I said this about 3 times on 3 different occasions, and I'll say it again. Maybe the algorithm will pick it up. For those of you in New York City that thinks it's so liberal, go look up Rosedale, Queens in the 70s and see what was happening to our community in Rosedale, Queens. I'll say it a 3rd time. Maybe the algorithm will pick it up. Rosedale, Queens in the 70s. There's a whole documentary on what was happening during that time period. That wasn't 300 years ago. Also in New York City, close to the 90s, meaning this lifetime, 30 years ago, 1989. In Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. I want to say Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. People were getting chased and lynched. Ever heard of the name Yusef Hawkins? Go look up Yusef Hawkins in 1989 in New York City. And many, many other things that happened after Jim Crow. So no, we don't have to look to 300 years so long ago when we have stuff happen. Oh, I bring it current, because then people say, oh, well, that's 30 years ago. Hurricane Katrina. Hurricane Katrina, you were treating citizens like fugitives. People from Louisiana are on this TikTok app sharing their experiences of how they were treated as American citizens in their own country in Louisiana when them levees broke. So don't sit up here and act like institutional racism happened so long ago and you just need to man up and stop crying. Hurricane Katrina. They let them people die as American citizens. That's why we bring it up. Because every time we try to get over it, another situation happens and we have to look and say, well, damn.
Well, that was a wonderful video. He did a great job explaining his experience living in the South and how he's seen it firsthand with himself and also with his family about the Jim Crow, the different forms of Jim Crow that's still going on currently, you know. And I love how he explained Katrina. And Katrina is a perfect example. I may do a video on Katrina as well, going more into what happened with Katrina. But Katrina is another example of how the people were treated. This happened in the 2000s, you guys. So these are current events. It's not stuff that's just happened a long time ago. And also, it's just so many incidences that has happened in the past. I can even give you an incident of me when I was a little girl growing up, I was born in the 70s. As a kid, I could not go to Stone Mountain. My parents would not let us go to Stone Mountain, especially at nighttime, because of the KKK. You know, they did the Klan rallies up there, and it was not safe for us to be up there because it was dangerous. And so, another form of segregation, you know, Jim Crow, all these racist tactics, you know. These are some of the things that are still going on right now. So, even to this very day, they still had the KKK going up there. And these, Stone Mountain's sacred ground for the indigenous people. You know, it's a sacred ground that has been tarnished. I did a video on that. Y'all may want to check that out about Stone Mountain. I talk about that. You know, I think I have a couple of videos, 2 or 3 videos about Stone Mountain that you all may want to check out too as well. But yes, you all have reached the ending of my video, you know. This is going to be the conclusion of this video. I would love to hear what you all think about this video. Do you feel like Jim Crow is still going on to this very day? Do you feel like the slavery has fully disappeared? Me personally, I think it's a different form of it. It was transformed and transitioned into a different form of it for today. But I don't think it ever fully disappeared because they got the prison system. The prison system is just nothing but a modern day form. And the cops are nothing but slave catchers of the past, you know. And that's why they're so heavily protected. They were protected during the slavery time of harassing and you know, and harming our people. It's still happening, you know, with our ancestors, and it's still happening to this very day. But please like this video, you guys, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you can get my updates. I also going to be putting some links below. I have the links to all our playlists and links of all my videos talking about the American Aborigines, mental health, and spirituality. I have over 800 videos. Don't forget to like the videos. Don't forget to binge watch my videos because I have a wealth of information for you guys. I also want to let you all know that I have a backup channel, and that's called Purpoz Healing Arts. That channel is going to be on my channel reads. I'm going to still do my channel reads on live. You know, that's still going to be up on, you know, I do my channel reads on either Saturday or Sunday, and you know, around the same times in the evening times. So look out for those. And if you didn't see those, you know, you can look at all the episodes. I have them in a playlist as well below. I also have the Purpoz Healing Arts store, and I have the new candles. You know, the Love and Peace, Peace and Light candles are now available on the Ipsy shop, the Purpoz Healing Arts shop. And I also have the Psychology Essence channel with my digital downloads of my mental health workbooks and journals for you all. And so don't forget to check that out as well. But yes, thank you for joining me, you guys. I enjoyed you guys. And love and peace. Bye-bye. Oh, and also don't forget to follow the people that I have featured in these videos. You know, make sure you follow them on TikTok. You know, they have some wonderful content that you can learn more. And also follow them on YouTube. Till next time, love and peace. Bye-bye.